Welcome to Talking Shop. We are looking at Matthew 16, 13 to 20.
Jesus has questions.
Yeah.
Jesus has questions.
And then we learn about the Pope. No? we'll get after it.
The evil way, spit on my Lord in every way, yet I'm still welcome.
Okay, Matthew 16, 13 to 20. And it does. It starts with Jesus asking a question, which is not usually the way it goes.
In Gentile territory, again, I might add.
Still in Gentile.
If anybody watched last
If
week.
anyone's keeping up.
Different Gentile territory.
Right.
He's been back and forth a few times
Yeah.
since then. But.
And his question is simple. Who do people say that the Son of Man is? Right? And the responses are?
Well, let's see. You got John the Baptist. You've got Elijah. Elijah leads you then into all the other prophets. So maybe Jeremiah, or take your pick. Any of those.
Any of those.
Probably a prophet, since John the Baptist is in that realm too. So their answer is one of the prophets. I think would suffice.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You think about it. The disciples are going around and they're hearing apparently these mumblings. People are like, oh, you hang out with one of those prophets that's around.
Yeah.
And it's not here, but I can't remember which gospel it is. It literally says John the Baptist back from the dead.
Yeah.
Is that John's gospel?
No.
It's all right.
I don't remember, but it's Herod, because Herod believes that when he hears about
that's
Jesus
exactly
doing
right.
it,
That's
that
exactly
but
right.
I don't remember where it's at.
Yeah,
right
John the
now.
Baptist back to and so you get this that there's some understanding or some belief that, hey, maybe one of these guys has come back, and it is Jesus.
Well,
right?
and rightly so. All of those prophets were prophesying, especially Elijah, which then John the Baptist, because Jesus links those two, were coming back at the end of days.
Yeah.
Right?
So you would kind
I
of
will send
expect
Elijah
these
before
guys
them.
before the end of days.
Yeah.
Right. And so Jesus listens to that, and then he, as a good teacher, focuses in. He goes, yeah, that's great. So what about you, right? Who do you say that I am? And good old Peter steps up, and this time he hits a home run.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you are the Christ Messiah. I do think it is important for your people, if they don't know this yet, that the Old Testament Messiah and the New Testament Christ mean the exact same thing.
Yes.
They mean the anointed.
Yeah.
And so, again, when you read any of the prophets, the anointed, my anointed, all of that, that's Christ Messiah.
Yeah. Unlike me, when I grew up, and probably like a lot of parishioners, I thought this was Jesus' last name, right? Yeah. Jesus Christ, that was his name, right? No, that's his title.
His title.
Right. He is Jesus' name. His title is the Messiah.
Yeah.
Which in Greek comes through as Christ.
Right. And the ultimate Messiah, then, the ultimate anointed of God, is King David. And so who was known as the Son of God. Who is also then the Messiah, the coming Messiah would be Son of David as well. So this is how you get all these terms, in there. So he rightly recognizes him as the one who is going to bring about restoration of Israel and who has this special relationship with God.
With God, yeah.
Son of the living God.
Yeah.
So again, yes, Peter makes a profound statement of faith here, but as you learn, not part of this text, but even now, Peter doesn't fully understand what that means.
Yeah. Right, because coming right on the heels of this, he has his own idea of what a Messiah ought to do.
Right. Yeah.
What the Christ ought to do.
This is almost, and we should think about this when we hear about this from anybody who has recently come to the church, right? And they have this faith, they understand that they say the right things, and then they'll say something weird, and you're like, not quite, right?
Yeah.
So they, he's got the faith, he understands it, but he doesn't understand it fully.
And even this, what we find is this wasn't his own discovery, right? He didn't kind of do this on his own. So that's what Jesus moves on with. He's blessed are you and we find out his dad's name, Jonah, right? Simon, son of Jonah. Flesh and blood didn't reveal this to you, but what?
My Father.
Yeah.
So not your Father, but my
Right.
Father, who is in heaven. Yeah.
Yeah, and you get here, this section, there's just a lot of play on the names, the titles, we already unpacked, just not much, but just all those prophets and what was expected of them.
Yeah.
And then the Messiah language applied to Jesus. And then you get Peter's real name, Simon, and he called him Simon Peter, but then now he's going to kind of double down on this. You are Peter, which means, as everyone should know, which literally just means rock.
Yeah. So if you're hearing this, even if you're reading it and you don't have that as capitalized, what he really says, you are rock, and upon this rock.
Right.
Right. So that's kind of what he says in the statement that he's making here. Because Cephas, again, going to some of the other places where you hear Peter's name, Cephas is just the Hebrew word for rock.
Rock. Yeah.
So
you are rock. So he says, you are rock, and upon this rock.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That could be an interesting kind of preaching point. I think something that you could be fun to explore with people is, what is this rock?
Yeah.
Is it Peter himself, or Simon Bar-Jonah?
Yeah.
Or is it this confession that has been revealed to him by his Father? Is this rock?
Yeah. Or the other possibility is it's the rock in which they're standing. So here's the take on it. You can find it out there if you look it up. Caesarea Philippi had a temple to the god Hades.
Okay.
Because there is a cave in Caesarea Philippi, you can go there even today, that went down into the ground, and that I think, I don't remember, but might have even been smoking at sometimes, and it was known as the gate to Hades.
Okay.
And so it is possible that they
they're
are
standing in a place
near that place.
They say, in those gates
will not be able to overcome this, right? So it is a possibility, and again, I haven't looked into it too much, but supposedly even the early church built a church on that rock, right? Yeah. But again, it does go back to the idea of and I think more than anything, what he's really focusing on is not so much the people, right? The church, the gathering that he's going to create, and how powerful that gathering is going to be.
Yeah, I think it's these things can be open to kind of multiple sort of interpretations, or like, you don't have to ground it into just one narrowly defined thing.
Right.
But that, like, I like what you said, like with the people, this gathering of people, but those people are gathered in this faith that confesses exactly what Peter confesses.
Exactly.
And in fact, more than what Peter confesses. Confesses it eventually with a full understanding of what that means to call this the Son of the living God.
Yeah. No, that's very fair. Because again, if you're going to base it on, and maybe this is one of the places where you don't go on a sermon, but you need to think about it. If you base it on Peter, that rock fails.
Yes.
If you base it on the faith and the confession of Peter,
that rock
never fails.
Right.
And so I think you've got to think about that in terms of Jesus and his words here about what will come against it and what will be able to prevail.
Right. And so that's that would be a great thing to preach on, because you get this when people, it probably depends on your makeup of your congregation, what people know. I made the joke at the opening about him talking about the Pope, but this becomes one of those main passages.
This is
to support the primacy of Peter,
and even the symbol of the Pope is the crossed keys, right?
The crossed keys, and that it becomes and even there they would say it wasn't so much the person, but a lineage that begins with him that establishes that, and that you can sort of broaden that out as well. But we're missing. I think we're missing that nature of the church and this gathering of the people and this faith, and that's always what it's been about.
Yeah, and
right?
even if you go to, obviously you'd have to go to John for the reinstatement of this, but even if you go to Peter, what ultimately helps Peter to prevail is the Christ, the Son of the living God.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you could almost say, Jesus saying, you are Peter, but upon this rock, right? Kind of pointing to himself.
I'll build
Because
my
we
church.
talk about the
Sure.
Jesus is, and that's almost, we talk about Peter's confession, but maybe it's Christ himself, our rock and
Yeah.
Redeemer,
Yeah.
right?
The rock
This
which followed them
church,
in the wilderness. Or
this
the,
rock I will build my
yeah.
church.
And so then flowing from that, I think you could. That's a rich area of preaching material. Kind of maybe even explore with your members what is the rock?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah.
In our day, right? And then it moves from that. You get that hell or Hades will not prevail against it. So it'll stand, right? And then he says, I give to you the keys of heaven. And this is the same thing is, to whom does he give it? Does he give it to a specific person and it only stays there? And this isn't unique to this spot. John's gospel, this is the upper room. After the resurrection of the Lord, he does the same language of what he gives his disciples, right?
Yep.
But it's important, right? He's giving keys and keys do what they do. They lock and unlock things. And what is it they're locking and unlocking here?
Well, he says whatever, but obviously the context, especially as you think about the sending out and all of that, is the power of the kingdom, or as Gibbs likes to say, the active rule and reign of God.
Right.
That if you withhold, and this is using John's language, but if you withhold that from the world,
It's withheld.
it's withheld.
Yeah.
And if you loose it on the world, it's loosed.
Yeah.
There's other things that could go into that. If you looked at binding and loosing from a Jewish context, it's this understanding that when God's people gather together, if they, and this is what the Sanhedrin believed, this is what Moses and the elders believed, when they made a decision on earth, gathered as the people of God, God looked at that as that was his decision. And so if you decided judgment against, it was God's judgment against. If you decided judgment for, it was God's judgment for. So again, going back to that kind of forgiveness idea, when I say to you that you're forgiven, you could actually make the argument, I'm forgiving you and God's agreeing with me. Now, that's backwards of the way we think of it.
Yeah.
But that's the binding and loosing.
Yeah.
Of God is willing to allow his people that power to bring his active rule and
this
reign.
actually works well with what we talked about last week with the Canaanite woman
sure, yeah.
who right, the crumbs at the table. She goes, that's enough.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, think about a crumb is that person saying to you, I forgive you.
Yeah.
And that's actually enough.
Yeah.
So that you're forgiven in heaven itself.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a shocking claim.
Yeah. And if you withhold those crumbs, they don't come.
Yeah, they don't come.
Wow.
You know, I think it's
Too bad you guys are getting this a week late. You could have done a sermon series.
That's right. That's right. Always gotta, yeah. So, and then what do we make of the very end? We should talk about it because it is interesting that he charges them or he commands them not to tell anyone that he is the Christ, which is what we just talked about, the Messiah, the anointed one.
And a lot of people will say the same thing, and I think it comes right as you see it in the next verses, which aren't part of the pericope, but it's because they don't understand. Even as they confess it, they don't understand. And even more than that, without the explanation of it, even the binding and loosing and all of that, to just go out and say to people, he's the Christ, now it's whatever they think the Christ to be. And so, again, kind of this could even be a sermon in and of itself. When you go to somebody and you say, have you heard of Jesus? And they think in their mind, oh, I know Jesus.
Yeah.
right?
This is who it is, yeah.
Instead, you have to open it up in a way where it brings them into
Yeah.
that story.
There's
to show them who it
there's
is.
I know there's a lot been written about it, but it is interesting that where you kind of pay attention to what titles does Jesus take for himself and which ones doesn't he? And what he takes is actually, though they are messianic titles from the Old Testament, or ones that convey that, they're more obscure ones.
Yeah.
Because I had a professor who would say, these words they're freighted, they're filled with stuff.
Yeah.
And he's like, so what he chooses is ones that maybe aren't quite as full.
Right.
And so he fills them. He's going to tell you what the Son of Man is.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, it's a strange title.
It
Like,
is
it
a-
is
yeah.
a title,
Yeah.
but it's a strange one. He doesn't choose, hey, tell everyone I'm the Christ, because you all have this idea of what that's supposed to be. And it's not going to look like that, which comes right after this.
Right.
Peter goes, no, you can't go,
Yeah.
can't go die.
You can't go die. That's not
the
what
way
the
it
Christ
works.
does.
Yeah. And he goes, that's becomes a satanic move, right? You're against me. So, so he's going to give his own, he's going to fill who he is with his own meaning.
Right.
And then we're learning that from him instead of our preconceived notions.
Which means, and this kind of goes back to Scripture, which means that we don't just get to take that title and run with it.
Yes.
That we actually need to go back into Scripture, and that when we separate ourselves, we need to go back and have that redefined for us each time.
Yeah. I mean, that's just good, hermeneutical principles, right? We let's allow Jesus to define himself, right? And instead of saying this is what you need to be for us.
Yeah, Dr. Cloas said it once. He said we should approach Scripture each time thinking that we might just be wrong.
That's right.
And allow Scripture to tell us what is
right.
right.
It's a good way to go.
So-
And hopefully that's what we try to do here. It's
Yeah.
why we gather together.
Yeah.
It's why hopefully you join us and maybe gather with your own colleagues to do the same thing. We invite you to leave any comments, share us with your friends, and check out craftedpreaching.com. A lot of good stuff there. God bless your preaching.